Happy New Year, everybody. Happy New Year. Hope everybody is having a great day. Had a great day yesterday and all those things, all those things, and all those things. Come on in, everybody. We are here to review what's it called? The Cult of a Housewife, of a Real Housewife, which is the 3-part documentary that TLC put out on Mary Cosby. So for those of you that do not watch The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, that is what this is in relation to. It is about the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. It's streaming on, if you have TLC or HBO Max. It was on TLC on January 1st, and then it came out on HBO Max today. I don't know why I thought it was the 8th. Maybe that's Traders starts on the 8th. Yeah, that's what you were thinking about, Don. Traders starts on the 8th. So let me say this. As somebody who has sort of been following this story from the beginning, a lot of this information, no, not a lot. I'm gonna say maybe like 50% of this information wasn't really new. As far as the salaciousness of Mary and her father, husband / granddaddy. I remember when the show first came on, and that was like the big story. Was this woman was on the show who had married her grandfather, right? Her step grandfather. Because I think at first we didn't even know it was her step grandfather. And then they made a distinction of it being the step grandfather. But what I will say is that this documentary connected some dots. Because like we knew information in a silo. But then when you start putting a lot of this information together in a succinct storyline, now we're kind of cooking with grease. Now, I'm going to say something that's going to be controversial. I'm going to say something that's going to be a little controversial. I know this documentary was about Mary running a cult. But I'm not too sure the cult didn't start with Mama. I'm just saying. But let's get into it. So I got like 7 pages of notes. Let me go back to my first page of notes, honey, so we can go in order. So it's a 3-part documentary. And I will say this, the documentary goes really quickly. I watched it on HBO Max, so there were no commercials. And it went really quickly. The first episode sort of got into like Mary Cosby and the housewives of it all and kind of like that part. And then part 2 sort of got into the history. It started, went back to Mary and yada, 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 yada. And then part 3, for me, and I find this with a lot of documentaries, the last part usually loses steam. And for me, part 3 sort of lost steam. I found myself kind of like, my mind started drifting off and wandering during part 3 because it was kind of like, kind of like, okay, I think we got it. You know what I'm saying? Oh, thank you, Lauren. I don't always take notes, child, but thank you, boo. So let's get into it. So I'm gonna just go through my notes. And then, those of you that watched it, y'all know y'all can add as we go through. Hold on, child. Look, my notes are okay. My notes then blended in with my notes from Sharice. Hold on. Okay. So the first part, we meet the Enoch family. We meet Michael Enoch, Rosalind Enoch, and Ernest Enoch. They grew up in the family. I mean, they grew up in the church. All three of them grew up in the church. Ernest was the keyboard player. Rosalind was led the choir. Michael, they ain't really say what Michael did. I feel like Michael was probably, I ain't gonna say prodigal son, but I feel like Michael was probably the least out of the three. He probably was there. Part three is that concluding paragraph that goes over all the parts. Right, yeah. And I find out with a lot of documentaries that the last however many parts, that final part is usually, like you said, yeah, that concluding paragraph where you just kind of putting it all together. Right, Kitty Dog. Kitty Dog said I had to watch part three twice because it didn't hold my three times, excuse me. No, twice, Lord, because it didn't hold my attention. Right. From the time they told the ushers to lock the doors, would have been the last time they saw me. Girl, listen. There's so many parts in this that I was like, so, and I will say this, even though I stand by the fact that in my opinion and in my experience, the House of Prayer is not a cult. I do see a lot of similarities in the House of Prayer and the way things were described in this in here, but where the difference lies is some of the stuff like locking the doors and ain't nobody leaving here until we raise a certain amount. Like, we don't do all that in the House of Prayer. But there were some similarities, I will say that. But yeah. Okay. So Michael is kind of telling, he's talking first, and he's saying how basically they show a picture of Mary as a kid, him as a kid, and that, Rosalind and like all of them were in the church together, and you could tell they were around, you could tell that they were all around the same age. They grew up together. Michael said even at one time they were like little boyfriend and girlfriend, but I mean, like, how when you 7 or 8 years old, they be like, that's your boyfriend, that's your girlfriend. You know how adults do that to kids. I kind of feel like that's what he was talking about. I don't feel like he meant that they really were like boyfriend and girlfriend, like for real. Why aren't they calling Osteen's church a cult? Well, tell me what about it is a cult, and I'll tell you, because I don't see how Osteen's church is a cult. I mean, why would you say that? I don't know why it's a cult. I mean, I've never been to his church. I only see what they record. I used to watch it on when it would come on TV. I stopped watching it after the flood down in Houston, and then people was flooding, and he wouldn't open up the church. I kind of was done with him after that. But I'm not sure what about it would be considered a cult. So tell me, Chuck, tell me. Okay. But even Michael said that Mary was always a bully. He said she was a mean girl and she was a bully even when they were kids. Well, Chuck, if you would listen now, Chuck, I love you, but the whole documentary is about Mary's church being called a cult. So listen to the review. You're gonna ask me why are they calling it a cult? Well, that's why we here. Now, Chuck. Okay, so Nubian Mahogany said, when I lived in Houston, I went to Joel Osteen's church. I didn't feel like it was a cult. DB said, oh, his church is a cult. Can't stand that man. And I live in Houston. He's much worse than people know. Okay, see. All right. All right, well, y'all can argue about whether it's a cult or not. Okay, let me go through my notes, y'all. I ain't even got started yet. Okay. But he said that Mary was a bully. And then they started talking about like Mary's wealth. Then you said you want an Osteen documentary. That's all. Okay, let me get to my notes. They said that her estimated wealth is $5 million, which to me, I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't have $5 million, but it doesn't seem like a lot of money. But okay, because they said she's one of the wealthiest housewives in Salt Lake City, and I'm like, okay. They have houses in Florida, Miami, New York, and Vegas. There's a 20-year age difference between Mary and Robert, which again we knew. They got married when she was 25 and he was 45. No. My notes are contradicting themselves, but there's a 20-year age difference. Let me just say that. They played the audio of the hey JB, what's up, boo? They played the audio of the birthday audio. I don't know if you guys remember when that audio leaked from her birthday, where she was complaining about how they only gave her 14 cards and how they were poor and she doesn't like poor people, and either they were being poor or they were selfish, and either way, if they're being selfish, they're still poor because God doesn't like selfish people. So like they talked about that. And again, she was asked about that at the reunion, and she said that audio was taken out of context. I don't know how you could take that out of context, but okay. Now she got more than Lisa bragging behind. Right. I don't think Lakewood is a cult. Just because you have a bad opinion of a pastor doesn't make the church a cult. I agree. That's why I said I want to know what people are saying is a cult. I mean, him not being a nice person doesn't make it a cult. But again, I want to get, we ain't even got, I'm just going to get into these notes. We're going to talk about this. Okay. Her own sister even said that she's a fraud. So her sister was interviewed. So some of the people in this were her sister, her cousin, her stepbrother, not stepbrothers, but her brothers by adoption. He was interviewed, and some former members, and her sister-in-law, I mean her cousin-in-law, I guess. Well, Brahman, well, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. All right. Oh, Lord. I'm going to flip the page the wrong way. Okay, wait a minute. Hold on. Sorry, y'all. I went the wrong way. Hold on. Okay. So the name of the church is Faith Temple Church. That's the name of the church. So then we, oh, I already said this. Okay. So Rosalind, Michael, Ernest, Enoch, their father Sam was actually the choir director, and they joined the church when they were children. They said their father had been looking for a church, and once he found that church, they were all in, right? They were all in, and the whole family was just members, and they were very active members of the church. Rosemary Crosby is Mama. That's who they refer to her. They refer to her as Mama. They said, and again, I'm going through the order of my notes, not necessarily the order of the timeline. They talked about when the money got to be really bad was after Mama died, and Mary and Robert came up with these things called heave offerings. And basically, the heave offerings was basically when they were like, we need to raise, we have an emergency, we need $100,000. We have an emergency, we need $50,000. And they said that basically at this point, people were like mortgaging their homes, people were losing their homes, people were taking money out of their 401ks. This is when they were like making public the people's donations to like shame people. Oh, you only gave $1,000. Well, so-and-so gave, $15,000. So-and-so gave $3,000. They said that there was a public embarrassment if you didn't give enough. There's one lady, Rosalind, the one that Rosalind Enoch, the one that said she sang in a choir and everything. She said at one point in time, like, she gave them people her debit card number so they could just run her debit card. Ernest Enoch said he took money out of his 401k, that he was borrowing against his 401k. They said that a lot of members of their church were like on food stamps and stuff like that because they would give all of their money to the church. They also they had a man by the name of Dr. Stephen Hassan, who is a cult expert, and he said the three foundations of a cult are power, money, and sex. And he said in the case of Faith Temple, there wasn't as much sex so much as it was money and power. However, I think the sex part comes in with this relationship between Mary and her step grandfather, right? Like, I don't. And there are some accusations that come in later on where people are accusing Robert of inappropriateness, you know. Right. Right, people giving up their debit card and all of that stuff. And they said that basically when Mary and them would come into church and say, oh, we're going to have a Heath meeting today, she said that was like, everybody was like, that's the worst thing you could hear is when they said, oh, we getting ready to have a Heath meeting. Because they knew that meant basically they were going to be raising this money and it was just going to be a bad thing, you know, a bad situation. Do y'all remember the episode? It was like maybe 2 seasons ago when Mary had on that beautiful Louis Vuitton coat. Because I remember saying I wanted that Louis Vuitton coat. And she went over to Whitney's house and she was telling Whitney and her kids about one of her church members who had died. Because I think they were talking about wearing a seatbelt. And Mary was like, I don't believe in wearing a seatbelt or something like that. And Whitney was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's dangerous. Why wouldn't you wear a seatbelt? And she was like, well, I just found out last night that one of my church members died. She was thrown out of the roof. Based on these 3 requirements, that would make the Catholic Church a cult. Well, no, I said the foundation, not the only thing. He goes into deeper. He gets into free will. He gets into public humiliation. He gets into other elements. But what he's saying is that is the foundation. He's not saying, because hell, if that were the only criteria of a cult, then everything is a damn cult. You know what I mean? But he was saying that that's like that foundation. Hey, Cyber Diva, how you doing? That's the foundation. He's not saying that's the only thing. Yeah. No. But he was saying the foundation. Okay. But y'all remember that story? And she said, and then she told the story about how the woman was thrown out of the roof of her car and her body landed down a ravine into a neighborhood. And Whitney was like, oh my gosh, is she alive? And she was like, no, she died. And she was like, but she was wearing her seatbelt. Y'all remember that clip? Well, that was Michael Enoch's daughter. And he was like, so that was Rosalind's niece, Ernest's niece, Michael's daughter. And so, of course, you know, all 3 of them spoke on it. And they were saying how, you know, how beautiful of a soul she was and how she was just a great person. And the fact that they watched her turn their daughter / niece's death into a joke and like almost like she didn't laugh when she said it, but she turned it into like a punchline, so to speak. And you know, they were like, and I want to say Michael said that was it for him. Rosalind was, let me not lie on Rosalind. I don't know when Ernest and Rosalind left. Let me not lie on the 2 of them. Because they spoke about it by the 3rd episode. They talked about what the last straw was for them. But neither one of them said that was the last straw. I think Michael did. But I don't think, like I said, I don't think Michael was that deep into the church by that time anyway. But their niece was. Their niece was still a member of Faith Temple Church when she died. And they had pictures of her with Mary, like she grew up in the church. And the father said that when he was cleaning his daughter's apartment out, he found a doll that Mary had given her when she was a kid. He was like, the fact that she held onto this doll all these years, like she loved Mary. So I don't know when it was the last straw for them, but that would have been the last straw for me. Then they said that after the daughter died, the family set up a GoFundMe. And they said Mary told the members of the church that they weren't allowed to donate to the GoFundMe. And if they did donate to the GoFundMe, they needed to get their money back. And Michael said, and you never even called to extend your condolences. This is somebody that was a member of your church, that when they died, they were still a member of the congregation. And you never even extended condolences, yet you could tell us You could tell the people not to donate to the GoFundMe, and you could talk about it on national television, but you couldn't even call us to extend your condolences. They just recently left the church. I want to say, and I should have wrote it down, but I'm like I said, by part 3, Rosalind left. So no, they had left the church already, because Rosalind said she left the church. Ernest and Rosalind, I think, left the church when the Housewives started. I think when Housewives started. So they were gone by the time this happened. Yeah. Yeah. Also, y'all remember when she sent Whitney that nasty text message, and she was like berating Whitney and talking about how ugly she was and how she needed plastic surgery and all this other stuff. So again, they were saying that is an example of, like, they were like, those text messages she sent Whitney was nothing. When she got ready to cut somebody out and she got mad with somebody, and they were like, those messages, that's just a small taste of how Mary Cosby get down. That's what they said, honey. That's what they said. Okay. So then they told the story of Cameron. Y'all remember Cameron? Cameron was on the show too. Cameron was on the season. She was a friend of Lisa's, a black guy. He was a friend of Lisa's, and he was the one that was warning Meredith to stay away from Mary because she's dangerous. Y'all remember that? Y'all remember Cameron? Now that sounds like my old pastor that cussed you out. Oh my. Well, Cameron Williams. So let me tell you who Cameron Williams is. Cameron Williams was a guy who joined their church. He said that he had been looking for a church for 3 years. He had saved up 3 years of tithes. He had been tithing for he had been putting money aside for 3 years, looking for the church to join, looking for a church. And when he found Faith Tabernacle, he donated those 3 years worth of tithes. So once he donated those 3 years worth of tithes, they said that at that point, that's when Mary started like trying to get close to him, trying to, bring him in and make him. So they made him a minister, and, and then the rumors were that the two of them were actually having an affair. Thank you, Ravine. Thank you, boo. You said you are quick. Oh, thank you, boo. Thank you for the super chat, my love. Oh yeah, I did set a goal. If we meet the goal, I'll open up the panel. So if we hit the goal, I'll open up the panel. If y'all want to come up and add y'all 2 cents. Okay. Now the story that they told in the documentary, I ain't saying this is the truth. I'm saying this is what was said in the documentary. Was Lisa reached out to Cameron. Lisa and Cameron were friends. And Lisa reached out to Cameron to find out if he knew anybody that would be good for the show. Now, I'm thinking Lisa called her black friend because they needed some color on the show. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents. They ain't say that. But I was just thinking, out of all of your friends to call, why you call him? But I was like, okay. So he said that he gave Lisa Mary's number because in his mind, if if Mary got on the show, that would expose her, and that would kind of be his get back, because she would be exposed for the horrible person that she is and all of the things that she's doing at the church. He thought that being on national television, because that it would just expose him. That's what he said. So in his mind, he referred Mary to, that was like his way of coming at her without directly coming at her, because I guess he was scared to come at her directly. No, the show was never crafted around Mary. The show, no, actually, the person that took the show was Jen Shaw. The show was crafted around Jen Shaw. It was never crafted around Mary. Nope, that's not true. That's not my understanding. Let me say that. That's not my understanding. I don't see Mary as a sexual creature, so I don't believe this affair nonsense. Oh, I do. I absolutely believe the affair. So Cameron, before he died, because he died. He had complications of surgery, had a brain tumor, and he died as a result of shortly after he got on the show, he died. And here's another reason why I believe it, because he told his story to Dan Cosby, Mary's cousin. And he said that I want to tell before I die, I want to tell my story. And I feel like he knew he was dying, or he thought he was dying. And that's why he wanted to tell his story. Okay. That's my opinion. So we heard the audio recordings where he told the story of how Mary basically came onto him, how the affair started, and how the affair continued. He said that he ended up taking out a second mortgage on his home. He gave over $300,000 to the church. Several CCs have said their content was used without their knowledge or permission. Well, I could tell. I felt like the people who they didn't interview were probably people that either didn't agree to be on the show, they didn't reach out to. Well, here's the reality, though. It's on the internet. It's on the internet. Somebody said, are they going to do a hit piece on the Mormon church? There are a lot of documentaries on the Mormon church. Actually, Heather just did a 3-part. Actually, I said I was going to do a review on that too. But Heather just did a 3-part documentary on the Mormon church. Very similar to what Leah Remini did with Scientology, where she went out and she interviewed former members and let them tell their story. Yeah, I mean, the Mormon, there's a lot of stuff out there about the Mormon church. Okay. So he ended up leaving the church when he realized that basically they just didn't care nothing about him. It was just all about the money. And that's when he left the church. And again, he died shortly after. I want to say he was already gone when those episodes aired. I'm not sure, but I know shortly after those episodes aired, he passed away. If it wasn't before that, but I really feel like he died before that, honestly. Mary and other members of the church went on to say that he died because he was speaking negatively of the church. And basically that was God's vengeance. Thank you, Inform, for going towards the goal. That was basically God's vengeance for him speaking out negatively about the church. That's what they said. So then part 2, so that was part 1, basically. So then part 2 went back and started from the beginning and talked about Mama. So Mama was born in Indianapolis, Indiana. We met a Dorothy Shannon, who was Mama's best friend. She said that the two of them were missionaries together from 1957 to 1960, that they were missionaries together. She said that in 1960, Mama told her that God had spoken to her and God was calling her to Salt Lake City. So she packed up her 3 kids and they walked to Salt Lake City. This is when I first said, now, because, but then they sort of clean, because I was like, now this is starting to sound real. She walked to Salt Lake City from Indiana, but then they sort of added to it. And they were like, she walked, caught the bus, and hitchhiked with her kids. And I was like, okay, that sounded a little bit more reasonable. But if y'all was waiting for me to believe that this woman with 3 kids walked from Indianapolis, Indiana to Salt Lake City, Utah in 1960, I was about to say, now I got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. But to say that she hitchhiked, caught the bus, and walked a little bit, okay, I might give you a little bit of that. They never talked about, well, they did talk about her first husband. Yes, they did. They went through the the family tree, but I didn't write it down. I didn't write it down. But she wasn't married at the time that she took her 3 kids to Salt Lake City. So she began doing church services in her living room once she got to Salt Lake City, and she worked as a housekeeper while she was doing church, doing church out of her home. And in 1968, she had saved up enough money to actually build a church. It was a very basic church, cinder block, kind of thing. It was a very basic thing. But that was the first church. They said that people would hear them as people would hear them as they were walking by, like during on Sundays, and they would go in, they would hear it, and they would put out of curiosity, and that's how she got a lot of members of the church, people who would just hear them. At the time she moved to Salt Lake City, the Black community was like 1%. And so one of the things that she did, which was a really great business model, was she started opening up businesses that would cater to Black people because, one, I'm sure because of racism, and 2, there just wasn't, like, she opened up a hair salon, she opened up a soul food restaurant, she had a mortuary, she had an insurance company, like all of these things. Because of course, when we start getting into racism, there were a lot of places that wouldn't bury Black people, like mortuaries that wouldn't bury. So she said, okay, fine, we're going to start our own mortuary where, that will bury Black people. Insurance companies. There were insurance companies that wouldn't insure Black people. So we're going to insure the Black, that kind of thing. And so that was another reason. That was another way that they built up their wealth. Because they were not just running the church, but now they also had businesses, right? But they said that she would still go back to Indianapolis once a year, and she would do those, do the outlets. They call them tent meetings, outside, like revivals and stuff like that. So they said she would go back to that. Hey, everybody coming in. That she would go back once a year and still would, have these tent meetings in Indianapolis. And that's where she met Robert Sr., who would become her husband. Now, he was 10 years younger than Mama, but he came back to Salt Lake City after one of these tent meetings, and she let him stay in one of her guest bedrooms. In the beginning, they said that she looked at him like, a son, but he made it clear that he was interested in her. He wasn't trying to be her son. He was trying to be her man. And they said that, she was a little nervous. She was worried about the age difference. She wasn't sure how people were going to like take that and accept it. And then, it probably is still like 1% now. Maybe it moved up to 2%, child. But, as a result, they eventually started dating and got married. Okay. So again, there's a 20-year age difference between him and Mama. There's a 20-year age difference between him and Mary. Go figure. Basically, Mary was 3 years old when the two of them, when Robert Sr. married Mama, Mary was 3 years old. Which means that this man witnessed Mary her whole life. This man watched Mary grow up They said that Mary felt like, I mean, not Mary, Mama felt like Robert Sr. was the right person to finish up the ministry. Like when she died, he was going to pick up the mantle. He was the one that was going to take it to the next, to, keep it going. So Mary I keep saying Mary. Mama, sorry. Mama. Mama adopted two children, brothers by the name of Demetrius and Sam. Demetrius was not in this documentary. I don't know if Demetrius passed away or Demetrius just didn't want to be a part of it. But Sam was in the documentary. And Sam said that Sam said he hates Robert. He said that Robert is a monster, that he was abusive, and that he was always a nasty SOB. He said he never liked him. He said shortly after Robert and Mama got married, Robert started having these meetings on the weekend with the boys and some of the other men, some of the other elders in the church, where it was basically like it was thought to be like this club for the young boys to be with the older guys to sort of bond and teach them how to be men. But basically he said that they were abusing the boys, that they were like beating them like military style, making them do like, torturing them, like making them hold books out, and run in place and putting pins under their knees. So if they lost their balance, they would, poke themselves in the back of their, with the knee. And you could see the guy, there was a couple of guys talking about these meetings, and they were saying how, that you could see them visibly getting upset at the recalling these meetings. And they said basically it was just torture. They said Robert was former military and some of the other guys were former military, and they treated them as if they were in basic training, basically, and they were kids. And they said they talked about one kid who didn't know how to do a sit-up, and basically they beat him, they kicked him, and because they couldn't do a sit-up. And he said that Mama didn't know about, like, Mama knew about the meetings, but Mama didn't know what happened at the meetings because the kids were too scared to tell, because of course they were scared that they probably thought Mama did know, I guess. And he said that basically Demetrius, his brother, was the one that snitched. Basically his brother was the one who told Mama, look, I don't want to go to those meetings anymore because they're beating us, they're torturing us, they're doing this, they're doing that. And Mama confronted Robert and was like, is that true? And Robert was like, well, we're just trying to toughen them up. He's exaggerating. We're just trying to teach them how to be men. And he said that Mama was like, okay, those meetings stop. That's it. And he said there was like an argument, but she didn't leave him, but the meeting stopped. Like they never had to do that again. Like that stopped. Now, Mary's mother, I don't know if you guys remember years ago, Mary's mother did an interview with Up and Adam. If you guys want to go and check that out, there was an interview done with Up and Adam a few years ago. Unfortunately, Mary's mother has passed away now, but I'm sure Up and Adam has it up in his Up and Adam has it probably marked or whatever on his channel. Where she kind of told her side of the story. We're going to get more into Mary's mother. But basically, Mary never had a really good relationship with her mom. Mary's sister didn't have a good relationship with their mom. She was a young mother, and she basically, it sounded like she wasn't a great mom. She was sort of an absentee mom. She was probably still out in them streets. You know what I'm saying? Thank you, Xavier. So I lost my train of thought. Hold on, let me get my notes back. I lost my train. That's why I want to read the chat, because if I read the chat, then I'm gonna get off track. I'll come back to the chat in a minute. But I'm trying not to get thrown off. But basically, they were saying that Mary has no relationship with her mother. Now, Mary's sister, this is Mary's sister describing Mary. She said that Mary was always a troublemaker. She said that she was always materialistic. She talked about, actually, Mary, Rosalind, all this is a mixture of all the things they said. They said she was always materialistic. They said she was a troublemaker. She was a runaway. She used to run away from home a lot. And she always started shit. They said it was multiple times when girls were looking for her to whoop her ass. They said that Mary was enrolled in school, but she did not attend school very often. Okay. They also talked about the fact that in a very nice way, they said Mary was a hoe. Now, they said it real nice. They said it very nicely, but they basically said Mary was a hoe. That Mary pretty much would be out here, and if a guy had the bank account, that she was down for the get down. Their grandmother raised them, mama raised them, but they said that Mary was just a wild child, and she always was a wild child, right? But that's what they said. They said Mary was out there in them streets, always looking for, the right guy to take care of her. Her sister said eventually at one point, Mary actually ended up living with her, and she talked about how Mary stole her car. And she said, it'd be one thing if she had my car for one day or whatever. 2 weeks. She was 2 weeks. She had her car, and she was just like, she said Mary was just a wild child. Now, she said that Mary's behavior was so unbecoming and it was so embarrassing to the church that Mama actually disfellowshipped her, meaning basically excommunicated her, kicked her out. And what that means is she could still come to church services. I mean, they didn't stop her from coming, but she could no longer be an active participant in the church service. She couldn't sit on any committee. She couldn't, be in the choir. She couldn't do anything. She could just come in and sit there if she wanted to. So at that time, she was disfellowshipped. Now, here's something that was interesting to me. They said that she was still disfellowshipped at the time that Mama died. But she was also married. And her husband was a lifelong member of the church. Y'all remember Mary was married before she married Robert Sr. And I was like, so wait a minute, hold on. So Mary was out in them streets, and her behavior was so bad that they had to basically excommunicate her from the church, but she was still married and her husband was a member of the church. I was like, huh? And they said that man, they called him Dana. Now, Dana wasn't in the documentary either, but they said Dana loved her dirty draws. They said Dana loved him some Mary, okay? So I was like, well, what the hell was Mary doing while she was fully married, to the point where the grandmama had to be like, girl, you got to, baby girl, you got to go. So I find it interesting because, again, if you go back to what Mary said that her grandmother left her everything. Y'all remember Mary said that? That her grandmother left her everything. You gone? Yeah. Okay, well, have a great, I was going to say have a great week. Hey, Tony, Happy New Year, boo. Ah. That's disrespectful. Oh, well, that's disrespectful too. I'm sorry, y'all. So that I found to be interesting, because when you start looking at the timeline, you're like, so wait a minute. Mary was out there acting a fool so much that her grandmama put her out of the church. But, and I know I said this before, but I'm just click one more time. Okay. And how do you feel? How did that make you feel when your husband then got put out of the church? I mean, you done got put out of the church, but you still in the church. No, I'm not implying that at all. Absolutely not. I'm not implying, no, Xavier, I'm not. I do not think that Mary was messing with Robert prior to, no, absolutely not. I'm not implying that Mary, I'm implying that Mary was, I'm implying that Mary was out in them streets. That's what I'm implying. I'm not implying that Mary was messing around with Robert. I'm implying that Mary was out in them streets, because I feel like there had to be an extreme situation or situations that would lead the grandmother to excommunicate her own granddaughter, who she basically raised as her daughter. And I think the fact that her husband was in the church probably had a lot to do with it, because whatever she was doing was not just embarrassing to her in the church, but it was also embarrassing the fact that her husband is sitting here every Sunday. You know what I'm saying? I think Mary was out in them streets. Just like they said, Mary, Mary liked that fast life, and she liked, men who could take care of her. And they said that Dana didn't have a lot of money. So I feel like she might have married Dana to give her legitimacy, but she was still out in them streets with getting that fast money. You know what I mean? So when grandmother died when she was 65. Robert obviously took over the church, but they said that it didn't take very long for people to realize that Robert didn't quite have that thing. You know what I'm saying? It is young. I thought about that too. I said 65 is young. Thank you for the super chat, Mims. Do you think Robert Sr. forgets he's inside and sometimes calls out mama's name by mistake? I feel that Mary wouldn't mind. Thank you for the super chat. Okay. So I wrote that in my notes. Mary said that she left everything to her, and that's a lie because she was excommunicated from the church. Plus, mama had like 25 grandchildren. Why would she pick Mary, the one grandchild that was not even in the church at that time? You know what I'm saying? That's like, why would he pick her? I mean, why would she pick Mary? And that's what the rest of the grandchildren and children. Remember, Mary had aunts and uncles, so they were all like, why would she choose you over us? Like, that's not a lie. Well, they said that after a couple of weeks, I did catch what the super chat said. I understood exactly what the super chat said, Mims. Yes, I did. They said that then Mary started spending time with Robert, going over to the house to comfort Robert. They started going. They said that Mary would go over there and cook dinner for him every night, and they would go out to dinner, and she was comforting Robert. And they said next thing they know, Mary popped up with a brand new candy apple red BMW. Baby. And for her birthday, he gave her like $100,000. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, when Mary was asked about her first marriage at the reunion for season 1, when they asked Mary about it, Mary said, well, that her divorce from her first husband didn't have anything to do with her marriage to Robert, and that her divorce from the first husband was due to, like, she kind of got, if you go back and watch, they showed the clip in a documentary, but she kind of got tongue-tied, like, well, no, that's not why we got, no. Well, I mean, it was just irreconcilable differences. I mean, it didn't have anything to do with Robert. However, her divorce was final from Dana on September the 8th of 1998. And she got married to Robert Sr. on September the 28th of 1998. So ain't nowhere in the world there was no overlap there, ma'am. Ain't nowhere in the world that you wasn't sneaky linking on Robert Sr. while you were still married when there's only a 20-day difference between your divorce and your marriage. Girl, stop. Girl, stop. They said that there was something called an All Saints meeting, which sounds like a church meeting, right? It sounds like it was a church meeting where basically they called. This was before the divorce, but basically they had this meeting where they called Dana down. Robert called Dana down to the front of the church, basically berated him in front of the church, accused him of him being the reason why Mary got excommunicated, him being the reason why Mary, why why their marriage was not good. And then basically they disfellowshipped him at the end of that meeting 2 days later. So this meeting must have happened on like September the 6th. 2 days later, the people showed up. Robert Sr. and some other men showed up at Dana's house and forced him to sign the divorce decree. And then, like I said, 10 days later, married Robert Sr. And they said as soon as Mary got married, Robert started putting her in positions of power. She immediately became the choir director. Then she became like over the deacons and the elders, and then like slowly but surely she just took over the church. They did throughout this. They did play like audio recordings of Mary and of Robert saying things like the only way to get to God is through me, and who is God? I'm God, like that kind of stuff, which again is further pushing this cult idea, this cult thing where you can hear Robert and Mary making very those type of comments, right? About you're gonna get to God, you got to get to me, and I'm God's representative here on earth, and that kind of thing. But if I'm being honest, when they play audio of Mama said a lot of the same stuff. So that's why I said I really think some of this mentality started with Mama. I'm not talking about the reunion from this season. I'm talking about the first season reunion. So then on April the 26th of 1998, so this happened before. Wait a minute, hold on. It must not be 1998. I must have wrote the year wrong. But I guess it was 1999. I must have wrote the year wrong. But on April the 26th, there was this infamous service that was called the walkout service. And Rosalind, who is Mary's mother, she talked about this in her interview with Up and Adam. And that was when basically her mother stood up in the pulpit and called them out. And they have a clip of it. Like there's a clip of it in the documentary of when it actually happened. They said that no, this happened before that. I'm sorry. No, this happened before they got married. Anyway, but so in April of 1998, and then in September, Mary got married. But her mother basically called him out. Her mother said that he was the devil, that he's dividing the church, that he is creating, strife, and this is not what the mama would have wanted. And baby Rosalind was going off. Like I said, they played the clip of it. Rosalind wasn't playing no games. And they said that Rosalind, who at the time was the choir director, she brought the choir in with her, and they said the choir was basically ready to fight and was like about it. And the choir was in the aisles and they were arguing. I mean, you could see all of this in the clip. People was in each other's face arguing, and basically the church at that point, the church was divided, right? Who in the church gave TLC the footage? I don't know, but baby, Chelsea had that footage. But basically, and less than a month from her divorce. So they said that that you could see the footage of them fighting each other. You could see, I mean, not fighting, but like them getting in each other's face and that kind of thing. And Rosalind Enoch, y'all remember Miss Rosalind? She was like, I was the one that called the police because it was starting to get out of hand. Like it was getting really bad. So she called the police and told them they was about to have a riot up at the church. So they have the footage of the police coming in, and the police actually escorted Rosalind out of the church. And then I guess the people who were following her left with her. And from that point forward, like the church had been divided. Up and Adam, in his interview, I feel like the mother, I mean, I know the mother talked about it, but I feel like the mother also talked about, I think she started her own church, I believe she did. She started her own church, I believe. Yeah, so they got married in September. So this happened in April, and then they got married in September. They said one of the things that Mary did was they installed cameras. And when Mary couldn't be there, like when Mary was at her house in Miami or her house in Vegas, she would watch the church services on the camera, and then she would call back and say, why is so-and-so acting like that? I don't like the way so-and-so was acting in church today. I don't like what so-and-so did. Like she was straight up like take notes and then call back and say, tell so-and-so they need to sit up, and tell so-and-so I didn't like their energy that they had today, and like that kind of stuff, right? They said that, and this is where the doctor who is the cult expert was talking about some of the things that those are some of the things that they started doing, which is cult-like behavior, where you creating this sense of surveillance where people feel like they're always on notice and they never know when they're being watched and they always have to act a certain way. They started not allowing church members. Well, they told them they couldn't talk to anybody that had left the church. So they were not allowed to talk to anybody that was not a member of the church. They was not allowed to talk to anybody that had left the church. And they were encouraged to report on people, right? Tell on people if they were doing things that broke the rules. They were encouraged to snitch, right? They said they also changed how confessions were done. They said under Mama, if you felt like you needed to confess something, you would write a letter, right? Like Scientology. Yep, Nubian. You would write a letter if you felt like you needed to confess something. And basically, once you wrote that letter to Mama, then you just had faith that Mama was going to pray for you and that it was forgiven. They said sometimes if Mama felt like she needed to follow up or she felt like she needed more information, then she would have a conversation with you. But other than that, nobody knew about your confession except for you and Mama. Well, under Robert and Mary, confessions were now public. Now you had to come down to the front of the church and you had to give your confessions publicly. Or if you went to Mary privately, Mary would just tell everybody, well, he told me he was cheating on his wife. She told me she stole that coat out the Macy's. And again, the doctor was saying, Dr. Hassan was saying that those are the things that cult leaders do, because again, it's that public humiliation. It's that that taking away the autonomy, that I'm going to encourage people to snitch on each other. So again, it was like it's building up that idea that nobody felt safe, right? So again, so that's why I said that's why I said in the beginning, it was the foundation, not the full throttle, right? Okay. All right, we almost done. All right, we almost done. They also said that members were expected to work for free. Basically, they were told it is an honor and a pleasure to serve Robert and Mary. And so y'all remember how Mary's cousin, we saw her on the show, Mary's cousin works for them. She works in their house. She's like Mary's like housekeeper. And it was they were talking about how Rosalind, y'all remember Rosalind, she talked about how she worked for Mary. She was unemployed and she worked for Mary for like 5 years and she was never paid. I said, you a 5-year lie. And she said she was like their housekeeper. They told a story about this woman named Pat. Pat was an older woman. She was like in her 80s and she was working for Mary and Robert as their housekeeper. And Rosalind talked about how badly they talked to that woman, how nasty they were to that woman. This was a white woman. They called her a slave. They said, "You're our slave now." And they were really, really nasty to that woman. And Rosalind talked about how one time Pat was so upset. She was crying and she was just like, she was like, "I just wish that when I go to sleep tonight, I just don't wake up. Like, I can't, like I'm basically I can't take this. Like, I just hope that, when I die, I just don't wake up." And eventually she did pass away. So it was Pat, Donnie, and Susie. They were all siblings, Pat, Donnie, and Susie. Now, Donnie gave all of his money to the church. He was a bus driver, and he basically gave all his money to the church. Their sister, Susie, tried to tell him, "Stop giving all your money to the church. Like, you're doing too much. You're giving away all your money. You're not going to have anything for yourself. Like, stop giving your money to the church." And she said that, she said she tried to talk him out to stop giving his money. And then Pat, who worked for them, who's her older sister, you could tell there's maybe a 15-20 year age difference between the two of them. Maybe not 20, but you could tell there was maybe about a 13 to 15 year age difference between them. They ended up kicking Susie out the church, because basically Susie was trying to interfere and trying to tell their brother to stop giving them all their money, and telling Pat, "Girl, you too old to be being somebody's damn housekeeper." So they kicked Susie out of the church. They excommunicated her, whatever the word was, defellowshipped her. And then when her brother and her sister died, she was not allowed in the church to come to their funeral. Now, personally, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, they would have had to call the police on. They'd have had another video of the police coming to the church, because they'd have had to call the police. You tell me I can't come to my sister's funeral and I can't come to my brother's funeral. Baby, they'd have had some more footage of the police at the church. Okay. Now, Rosalind said, this I know Rosalind was still on the show. Was still work in the church when the show debuted, because Rosalind said that they did not know where all the money was going until they saw the show, and they saw that closet. Remember, Mary's got the closet of just designer stuff all over the place, and she's bragging about all her designer stuff and bragging about all the houses they have and all of that. She said, "Baby, we did not know. We really thought that the money was going back into the ministry and going back into the businesses and was building up the ministry. We didn't know that much of our money was going in their pockets until we saw it on the show." But I have to say now, Rosalind, I got to pop your hand a little bit, my love, because how was you a housekeeper in their house and you didn't know? YouTube has been doing that, Mills. It's done that to me on a couple of other people's channel too. I don't know. It's some sort of glitch in the system. If you wait a few minutes, it'll let you in. You don't have to wait the whole 5 minutes. Just refresh it, because it's been doing that to me too. Well, I don't think the house was the issue. I think they understood the house and driving a nice car. Mary having literally a whole bedroom full of designer shit and them owning 5 other homes, I think was because, again, you see her showing up on Sunday with Louboutins on. You see her walking around with a gold microphone. I'm sure she drives a nice car. I don't know if we've ever seen Mary drive on the show. So I don't know what Mary actually drives. I think we did see her drive. She had a Range Rover. I'm not sure. Which I'm sure a Range Rover isn't a big deal in Salt Lake City, Utah, because of the snow and stuff. But them having a nice house, I don't think was the issue either. But literally having a whole bedroom full of just shit, and then you talking about every closet in this house is full of my clothes, and we own 5 other homes. Yeah, that's a different level. But again, Rosalind, now look, I have my opinion about the quote, but I gotta pop your hand on that one, because, girl, If you were their housekeeper for 5 years, how you ain't see all that shit coming in and out the house? I think mama was stealing from the church and buying properties. Well, I do, listen, like I said, I think a lot of this shit started before Mary and Robert. If I'm being honest, I just think that Mary and Robert weren't as slick with it. You see what I'm saying? See, one thing they say about cults, most cults, I can't speak for every cult, most cults don't survive when the leader dies. Most of them don't. Because people are so connected to the leader that you either have to turn the leader into the martyr, and then people worship the memory of the martyr, or the cult falls apart. But they were definitely using church money. I mean, and again, even when they talked about mama starting these businesses, yeah, but a lot of these properties existed under, because they have property in Indianapolis, and I find it interesting that they didn't bring that up on a documentary. But I remember reading about that, because again, I fell down the rabbit hole. Season 1, I fell down the rabbit hole, and I remember reading that in an article, season 1, that the church has property, all those properties, Las Vegas, New York, Miami, but they also have property in Indianapolis, where mama is originally from. They own, matter of fact, they had a second church in Indianapolis, and I find it interesting that the documentary didn't bring that up. The documentary didn't talk about the fact that there was a whole second church. They said she went back to Indianapolis once a year and did tent meetings, but they didn't say nothing about her opening up a whole church out there. And I don't know why. I mean, maybe they just wanted to focus on Mary. But again, I will say this. I don't think this was a hit job on Mary, because I think that there are people, in Vegas too. I don't think it's a hit job on Mary, but I do feel like, they had decided that Mary was the villain. And so everything was built around Mary being the villain. And anything outside of Mary being the villain, if it didn't fit into that narrative, they didn't include it, in my opinion. Because I don't understand why you wouldn't talk about the fact that there were properties in Indianapolis and there was a whole second church there. You didn't talk about the lawsuits. Like, there's litigation still going on. Like, you didn't talk about the fact that Mary, I believe it was Mary's mother, actually sued. Like, a lot of stuff I don't think they brought up. And I'm just wondering why. You know what I mean? Like, did you not bring it up because it didn't fit the narrative? Because there's all sort of litigation that is still currently going on. From my understanding, I could be wrong, Mims, if I'm wrong, but I know that there were multiple lawsuits. Now, I don't know, and I don't think all of them have been settled. So I just find it interesting that certain things weren't included that I think are important if you're trying to build this story. But that's just my opinion. With that said, is it what they're saying is truly credible? I think so. Here's my opinion. I think a lot of what they said is credible, but how do I want to word this? I think a lot of what they're saying is credible because I believe the people telling these stories, but I also believe that production didn't include let me rewind what I was going to say. Do I think it's credible? Yes. I think there's a percentage of it that's credible. Do I think that I believe everything that's being said? No. I think a lot of these people have an agenda. They're angry. They don't like Mary. They don't like Robert. A lot of them are still worshiping mama. We're going to get to that in a minute because we're almost done with my notes. We're going to get to that in a minute. But yeah, I think that I just think they could have added more. And I understand that it was already 3 parts. Maybe they didn't want it to be too long. But it was a perfect time to add the lawsuits was when they talked about her mother how her mother had to be escorted out of the church because some of the lawsuits go back to her mother. They didn't even bring up the fact that people believe that Robert killed mama. Like, they didn't even bring any of that up. And I believe that was a lawsuit. I believe he's got a wrongful death lawsuit or something like that. They didn't bring up any of that. And I'm like, why wouldn't you bring that up? Because I think they're so focused on making Mary the bad guy. You know? You didn't even bring up the fact that people believe that Robert did it. You know? I don't know. Like I said, I fell into the rabbit hole 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah, DB. Let me see. Hold on. Let me Google it. Yeah, Mims. I don't know why it's doing that. But it did that to me. It's done that to me in Cruz's channel a couple of times. Where it says I'm not a member. I mean, I'm not a subscriber. Let me see. Robert Cosby. Hold on. Senior. Let me see what comes up. Here's an article from People magazine. Let me just see. It says, oh, damn it. Da, 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 da. Hold on. This is People magazine, so they may not get into all of the dirt, child. It's People magazine. All right. No, this ain't what I want. That ain't gonna tell me what I want. Let me see. See, now all the stuff that's popping up is gonna be the new stuff. Here's one. Here's a lawsuit right here. It says Mary Cosby, $3.6 million church lawsuit heats up as Star reveals bombshell details from the past. Court battle against the people who ran her church finances. Oh, this is when she said that people stole her money. But yeah, anyway, I don't want to hold up I don't want to hold up the live. But yeah, there was rumors that he actually took out mama. And there was, I believe Mary's mother sued him, I believe. But I know there were lawsuits, and I know those were rumors that were out there. I remember seeing a part of an Adams interview with Mary's mom and husband. Something just seemed off. It was like empty room, and her mom had big sunglasses on, drinking out of a big cup. Yeah, child. Well, they say her mama was a little off too, you know. Yes, Mims, they want you to do a background check, child, Lord. You know, Mims will investigate. But I remember, again, you know, because of this documentary, everything that's popping up is this stuff now. So I don't want to hold up the live, but it's out there. I just got to dig a little deeper. But it's out there because I remember I found it. There were multiple lawsuits. Like I said, I believe Mary's mother sued. Former church members have sued. Like, yeah, there are multiple lawsuits out there. But anyway, so let me finish going through my notes because I'm almost done. So then there was this weird story. Now, this is where, like I said, this is where it was the final episode, and I felt like they were just kind of throwing stuff in there. This is where it got a little weird. So there was Kim Cosby and Dan Cosby. Dan Cosby is the cousin. Kim is his wife. So Kim started telling the story about how basically she used to be really good friends with Mary. Her and Mary were really cool. You know what, Mims? The way they were talking in this documentary, it doesn't sound like she did. It damn sure don't sound like she went to college. Because her sister said there's a difference between being enrolled in school and going to school, child. You interviewed Dan? Oh, you did? Okay. I'm gonna have to look at that interview again. And it was this weird story where she said her and Mary were really good friends, and then they took this trip to California, and she said they were out on the balcony at the hotel looking at the ocean, you know, just kind of talking. Mary went back in the room. Her and Robert were out on the balcony, and then when they got back home, Mary basically accused her of basically it sounded like Mary accused her of trying to come after her husband. But then it was weird because then she said that Robert started calling her up to the house to have these counseling sessions all the time and these meetings, and how he was trying to separate her from her husband, and how he would invite her and the kids to the house, but he would never invite Dan, who was the cousin, to the house. And eventually one day she said that Robert called and invited her to go to Vegas with him, and basically said, if I paid you, would you come to Vegas with me? And the husband, Dan, heard it and was like, what? And she was like, yeah. And she said, that's the last time I talked to him. Now, I'm going to be honest with y'all. And for those of y'all who watched the documentary, y'all tell me if y'all agree. I'm going to be honest with y'all. It sounded to me like that woman had an affair with Robert. I'm not saying she did. I'm saying that's how it sounded. Because I was like, huh? Why would you keep going? Like, because she said that her and her husband weren't in a good place at the time. Because I was like, why would you allow this to happen? Like, if Mary already accused you of trying to sleep with her husband and trying to take what she had, why would you put yourself in a situation and keep going over to this woman's house and be in counseling sessions with her husband? And then you said, and your husband would never be invited. So it was intentional that they were trying to get you away from your husband. It was just weird. And then one day, your husband hears Robert making an indecent proposal to you. And that's we've never been over there since. But you was going over there all them months before? You mean to tell me that's the first time that man said something inappropriate to you? I don't believe it. I don't believe that's the first time that man said something inappropriate to her. Right, counseling, right. And she talked about how that man kept calling her and how he was just calling her and calling her and calling her and calling her. I was like, it don't even make no sense. That story didn't make, see, when stuff don't make sense, then it ain't true. The story didn't make sense, which made me seem like you were leaving something out. I feel like you were leaving something out. The story didn't make no sense. But from there, allegedly, other former members have allegedly come forward and said that Robert, made indecent proposals to them. Robert tried to get with them. Now, I'm going to be honest. How do I say this? Because I ain't trying to start no shit. I ain't trying to beef with nobody. So how do I say this? There was some people on this documentary who I don't believe everything they say out their mouth. I'm going to just leave it at that. Okay, moving right along. I'm done. I'm going to leave it there. And they talked about how when the accusations started getting really bad, as far as Mary being accused of stealing, her husband, the accusations with the church. When things got really, 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 really bad, that was the season that Mary basically skipped the reunion so that obviously she wouldn't have to answer any questions at the reunion. That was when Mary skipped the reunion. We know that Mary came back as a friend of, and then she's back. She came back season 5 as a full-time house member, but conveniently, she no longer speaks on the church. She no longer really speaks on her husband. Her husband isn't even on the show anymore. Hey, Happy New Year, Cross Country Cruiser. Hey, my love. Thank you so much. And they did say that her husband's no longer on the show because of issues with production. That he's no longer on the show because, I don't know, he got into it with production. But it was interesting. Because Up and Adam was one of the people that interviewed, and he was like, look, I haven't seen her contract, but I just find it interesting that there's certain things that just aren't said, certain conversations that she doesn't have, like, you know, like kind of thing. Right, that's the last time we ever saw Robert Jr. as well. I mean Robert Sr. as well. I'm almost done, y'all. I'm pretty much done. Now, there's a new church that has started called Soul Restoration. And basically, that church is pretty much all the old members that left the faith church. And here's why, when I said at the beginning of my review, why I said that a lot of this goes, in my opinion, a lot of this goes back to Mama. Because the preacher that runs this new church, he's a former member. And the clip that they played of him preaching, he says, Mama sent me to keep the legacy going. Why Mama sent you? Why God didn't send you? See, I still feel like y'all putting Mama on a pedestal that she don't need to be on. And that's no disrespect to Mama. I don't know that woman. Sounds like she did a lot of great things. But it just was weird to me because that's why I said it sounds like this starts at the top. Because why are you talking about what Mama did? Mama sent me. Mama didn't send nothing. In my opinion. Yeah, I know. And that's what I'm saying. I mean, and again, you have to watch the documentary to see. So to go back to the whole premise of this conversation about it being a cult, I don't know. I don't go to that church. I can't say it's a cult or not. I can't say that. What I can say is, in my opinion, based on what was shared, I personally, thank you, Nay, donation to the building fund. Thank you, boo. I personally can say I could not be a member of that church. Baby, they'd have lost me when Mary married the grandfather. And a lot of people did leave. To be fair, a lot of people did leave. But, baby, that's where they'd have lost me. Ain't no way in the world I'm still sitting up under a church where the first lady and the pastor, well, that's her granddaddy. I don't care if it ain't no blood involved. He raised that girl. He's known that girl her whole life. If she was 3 when he married her grandmother, that means he's known her for longer than that. Ain't no way in hell. That's where they'd have left me. But if you watch the documentary and you watch Dr. Hassan go through the elements of a cult and they show the different things that are going on and they line it up with what he says, what is an element of a cult. then I'll let you come to your conclusion. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna sit here and say, yes, it's a cult. I ain't there. I don't know. But I will say that at the very least, I do think it's a misguided congregation. Because I think both of those churches give way too much weight. Definitely shocked that they still have a congregation, but I'm not surprised considering some of the other things that Utah is known for. Right. I mean, the Mormon church is there too, and the Mormon church got a lot of shit with them. So what you gonna do? So yeah, do I think it was a good documentary? I do. I think it was a good documentary. I think it was a good documentary. I think that it was I think they could have gone deeper into some of the legal stuff. I think they could have included some more of the stuff that's happened, but I do think they did a good job of I mean, definitely. I mean, I already looked at Mary Cosby, you know. Thank you, Tracy. If it walks like a cult and talks like a cult, it's a damn cult. Like the video, Lord. Okay. Thank you, Tracy. Why does everyone have Cosby as their last name? Huh? I don't understand your question. Mary's people and Robert Sr. very odd. That's their last name. You mean Cosby? You mean why their last name is Cosby? Because he adopted them. So Cosby is his last name. When he married Mama, he adopted her kids. That's why they have his last name. Pentecostal. Did Robert take Mama's name? Maybe Robert. Shit. Maybe I'm wrong, y'all. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Robert took. Maybe I'm wrong. Hold on. Child, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. That's crazy. Maybe I'm wrong on that one, y'all. Mary's maiden name is something else. Hold on. Let me see. Hold on. Let me see something. Maybe he did take her name. I don't know. I have to go back and look, y'all. Now that you say that, I think I remember something about that. That he did take the mama's name, the grandmother's name. Now that you said that, I kind of think I remember reading that. I'm gonna have to go back and find the old articles that I read. Yeah, I'm gonna go back and do some research. Because I remember reading a lot of this stuff, but like I said, now everything that's going to pop up is stuff related to the documentary and stuff like that. I gotta get below the surface. I gotta get below the surface, child. Okay. Mary's maiden name. Shut up, Mims. Not Mary's maiden name was Jezebel. Mary Cosby's maiden name was Jefferson. Right. That was her mother. Right. And then I'm gonna look it up. I'm gonna look it up because that's a good question. And now that you say it, I don't remember because I feel like I remember seeing something like that before, that he took the grandmother's name instead of the grandmother taking his name. Now that you bring it up, I kind of remember that. So I need to look that up. But I also want to look up those lawsuits because, baby, there was some law. I'm gonna look up those lawsuits. Because, like I said, there were lawsuits against the church, and I know Mary's mother was one of those lawsuits. Mary's mother sued the church, but there were other people that sued as well. That was like former members and stuff like that. Yeah, it was a lot. And again, I really wish they had gotten, because they make it seem like nobody did anything, and people did. Like, people did fight back. People did file lawsuits. Like, people didn't just walk away. Like, there was a lot more to the story as far as that part of it is concerned. And I wish they had kind of brought it up. Yeah, I kind of wish they had addressed that. But anyway, oh Lord. With that being said, y'all, and she was married before, and it was Harris. Who was married before? Who was married before? Mary or Mary's grandmother? If you have those old lawsuits, send them to me, Tracy. Mary. Yeah, if you have it, send it to me, Tracy. Please and thank you. All right, y'all. Yeah, I know Mary's maiden name. Because remember, Mary was married. All right, y'all. Hold on, let me see that. What does it say? Did you see that TLC didn't contact those content creators to ask to use their footage? Wait a minute, what? Her abuser? Wait a minute, what? Mims, what you say? I don't see what you said either, Mims. Hold on. Mims, I don't see what you said to Tracy either. What did you say? I don't see what you said either, Mims. So whatever you said, it didn't come up on my screen either. I just see, so you just gonna ignore me, Tracy. You said, I'm trying to rescue you from your abuser, Really Be. Yeah, a lot of content creators were in that video, but I kind of figured that if they didn't interview you, either they reached out to you and you said no, or they didn't reach out to you. Now, this is what I'm going to say. And this is my opinion. And Mims, if I'm wrong, please correct me if I'm wrong. Is it a great courtesy? Yes. But I don't feel like they used anybody's content long enough that it violated the law. Like, you can use a certain percentage, right? Mims, I'm wrong. Now, do I think they should have contacted them? Yes. Do I think they should have asked people's permission? Absolutely. I think it's fucked up that they use so much social media content and they didn't even give the content creators the courtesy. I agree 120%. But I don't think they broke a law. I think it was just bad bad practice. Kim Pryor should be mad. I mean, anybody that was used then they didn't reach out to should be mad. You know, I agree. But it wasn't consecutive. See, it has to be. That's why a lot of times when you see us do reaction videos, we only play a certain amount and then we stop and then we talk and then we play a little bit more and then we stop and then we talk. Yeah, so I feel like that's what they did. And now, like I said, was it bad practice? Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the other thing. You said Up and Adam seems like they hate Mary. That is another reason why I feel like the content creators that they did actually use, I think, are people who are biased. That's my opinion. And I think that was by design. I don't think it was an accident that the people they used are biased. I think that was by design. But that's my opinion. I'm sure that the content creators that are upset by it, I'm sure that they will follow up. How would they need to follow up? They might have, okay, ma'am said they might have an agreement with YouTube for permission. Well, some of that stuff wasn't even YouTube. Some of that was TikTok and Instagram stuff. Yep. Wow, not the bully bee treatment. I didn't even do nothing to you, Tracy. I can believe that. I think Kev on stage and Angel said they didn't know snippets from their pod was in a documentary. I think it was Lizzo's. Yeah. Yeah, I think if it's under a certain amount, they don't have to. Now, should they? Yeah, I think they should, but I don't think they have to, which is fucked up, in my opinion. Anyway, y'all, let me get out of here. I've been on here for an hour and a half, all right? I appreciate y'all. Thank you for the super chats. We didn't quite hit our goal, but I will do an open panel. I want to try to get some of this other information. I want to go look at those lawsuits again and refresh my memory on some stuff. But I will do a open panel on just hot topics. And you guys can come up. I'll try to do it before the weekend's over. I can't promise, but I'll try to do it before the weekend's over. I know tomorrow I can't at all, but maybe on Sunday I can do an open panel. Okay. Because we didn't hit the goal, but we got like 8 super chats. So I mean that was close. How long was what? The documentary? It's 3 parts, and each part is like 40 minutes. So yeah. All right, y'all. I'm out of here. I'm gonna talk to y'all later. Peace.